Love, Janessa, a brand new true crime podcast from the BBC World Service and CBC Podcasts. It's a story about love, deceit, and survival, and it's available now. Find out more at the end of this podcast.
Hello, I'm James Reynolds. Welcome to BBC OS Conversations on babies and families. Countries like Japan, South Korea and China are seeing birth rates falling, with warnings that societies are now at risk. We bring together women in Japan, chat with a couple in South Korea, and 3 women discuss why they chose not to have children.
I have a family already. My parents, I have my partner, I have my close friends. They are considered as a family as well. It's a great life where you can choose your family as well.
A few weeks ago, we were told that the world's population had reached 8 billion. But that doesn't tell the full story, because several countries are experiencing a fall in the number of children being born. That has potentially serious consequences. More older people puts rising strain on things like healthcare, and a declining younger population means fewer people working, so less money sloshing around in the economy. This fact worries decision makers in South Korea, which has the world's lowest fertility rate. Sarah, who's originally from Canada, and her husband Kyoho host the Two Hearts, One Soul YouTube channel. They live with their cat in the South Korean capital.
To be honest, I've never really been a kid person, but my sister, she always wanted to be a mother more than anything. And once she had 2 kids, I saw her going through all that. I realized, okay, this is not for me. You know, I can be a fun uncle with a nephew and niece. However, I just thought like, okay, this is not for me. And also Sarah, she doesn't want kids, so we were in the same boat.
Funny enough, when we first got married, we've been married for 8 years. And the last 5 to 10 years, I would say, in Korea, there's been a massive cultural shift when it comes to having children or not having children. Even when we first got married, it's very common here to get the baby question. And when we would tell people simply, oh, you know, we're actually not going to have kids, the look of shock on people's faces was, you know, a thing to behold. People don't ask us as much these days, but when they do and we tell them our stance, they're just kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, my daughter doesn't want kids either.
So you don't get that face anymore, that expression.
We seldom get that shocked expression, but, you know, in our early days, it was very common, yes.
Mm-hmm. Actually, some of my friends were having like dinner together and they were asking me a question about like, how did you talk to your parents about this matter? And because some of them also don't want kids, or they're not 100% sure whether they want kids or not. Because in Korea, traditionally, there's a kind of hierarchy and there's still pressure from parents, kind of like, I want to see grandchildren, things like that.
Did you guys feel that yourselves?
At first, I did a little bit because, I mean, my sister was already getting pregnant and my relatives were also asking that questions, like, are you guys planning to have babies? However, I was just like, made sure like I convinced my mom that, and told my mom basically, we don't want kids. So can you please not ask any more questions about this?
How did that conversation go?
It took about like 2 hours. We were having a really deep conversation. My mom, at first, she was really shocked because she, I guess, just thought that we will obviously have kids. But I told her why we don't want kids, and also I'm not really a kid person. And, you know, I kind of explained all the reasons, and my mother was pretty shocked at first, but then later on, I think she started to understand about this, decision that we made, Sarah and I.
My conversation with my parents was very different. It lasted all of 20 seconds, and my dad just said, whatever, your choice. And it was that was it.
Every family's different, but are there different cultural factors at work for each of your respective families?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. As I was just talking about before, it's only in the last 5 or 10 years that it's become not a taboo to choose not to have kids in Korea. I mean, we even had people ask us early on, why did you get married if you're not going to have kids? It's just, they couldn't wrap their minds around, a marriage without the goal of having children. But it's so common nowadays. And even in Korea, the marriage rate itself is very, very low. When or if Koreans do get married, it's often in their mid-30s now. So it's actually much later than other OECD countries, which is also another reason why the birth rate is as low as it is. So people who do want to have children are having fewer because they're getting married later.
Did money ever come into it for both of you?
Oh, absolutely. I don't know. We kind of look at the general choice to have children or not as almost like two groups. Like group one would kind of be, you're just not a kid person and it's just not for you and you don't yearn to have children. And then the other group are people who maybe they do want children or they're thinking of it, but they choose not to because of external factors such as, it's very expensive and housing costs and stagnant wages. And particularly in Korea, the education system is known to be very, very stressful for kids, and a lot of people in their 20s and 30s went through that themselves, and they don't want to perpetuate that cycle and see their kids go through the same stress that they did.
Yeah, it's a very competitive society here.
Korea's college entrance exam is quite famous worldwide, and basically the whole country is at a standstill on that morning of this 8-hour exam. There's a portion of the listening exam for English where planes are not allowed to take off. The military is not allowed to practice. Everybody goes to work a few hours later that day, so there's no traffic, so the kids aren't late to this exam. And this exam basically determines your whole life in Korea. It determines whether you can get into a good university, which means the kind of job you'll get, your economic future, even the kind of partner that you can marry someday is all tied into where you'll be after your exam scores come out. So these kids are studying their whole lives until that one moment that's basically going to determine their entire future.
I want to read you the analysis of one of our correspondents, Jean McKenzie, who says a crisis is brewing if South Korea's population continues to shrink. There won't be enough people to grow the economy. Politicians, Jean writes, have thrown billions of dollars at trying to convince people to have children. They're still scratching their heads as to why this hasn't worked. Did you feel any of that national pressure yourselves? Not pressure from families, but that national political pressure?
Personally, it doesn't really influence my choices, but Koreans have this kind of word for people who have more than 2 kids. They call them a patriot. Because it's so incredibly rare to have, even 2 kids these days, let alone 3. And there are different government benefits if you have, 3 or more children. But it's almost seen as you're kind of contributing to sinking the country, I suppose, if you choose to opt out of having children. But at the same time, everybody kind of understands because life is pretty hard enough as it is, for people in their 20s and 30s who having a hard time getting jobs and the housing costs and everything. For them, they're like, oh my God, I can barely support myself. How am I supposed to raise a whole person and provide a good life for them?
Sarah and Kyuho in Seoul, happily married and happily without children. China is seeing record low birth rates as well, and its people have been offered incentives such as cash to have more kids. We got these messages from China.
My name is Yvonne. I'm 24 years old from southeast part of China. I'm going to have 1 kid in the future because I think children are really adorable, but not more because, like in China, raising a kid properly, the cost is really high, right?
Hi, my name is Bo Wen. I'm 28 and I come from a tier 2 city in the north of China. I want to have 2 children after getting married because I love kids and I get along well with them too. But this mind is shaken due to the increasing cost of a living because it's already very expensive for young people to maintain their lives in the city, not to mention the high cost of raising a child, including food and other necessities, education and entertainment, and so on.
Hi, I'm Kean Cao from Shanghai, China, and I'm currently based in London. I'm 24 years old. For this question, I want to have kids in the future, but not at the current stage. Probably when I settle down somewhere and I have a stable amount of income, because I want to be able to give my kids the right to choose what they want in the future.
Now let's look over to Japan. There are so many older people in the country that almost a third of the population is over 65. The Prime Minister, Fumio Kishida, has warned that the country is on the brink of not even being able to function as a society because of it. So, I want to introduce you to Yuko Tamura, a writer living in Tokyo. She has a young daughter. And firstly, you'll hear from Nobuko Kobayashi, also in Tokyo. She chose not to have kids. Nobuko is a partner for a major international consultancy and describes herself as happily divorced.
I never had a strong urge to have kids anyway. Even if I was curious, I guess in my 20s, in my 30s, I was busy working and work was fun. And I had other priorities than having babies.
I have a 5-year-old daughter, and I was once a dedicated full-time office worker at an American pharmaceutical company. And I never imagined I would quit my job, but I live in Tokyo, and after having her, I started hunting daycare facilities in Tokyo, but it didn't work at all. I kept receiving rejection letters again and again, and I had no other options but to quit my job, and I became a freelance writer at this moment.
And how is your life right now with your daughter?
Well, it's been a privilege to be with her very closely, but also from time to time, I cannot stop thinking about the other path I couldn't take because of the lack of daycare in Tokyo.
What is expected of women today in Japan when you have conversations with colleagues or with friends or family?
I think it's changed a lot over the years. I'm 49, but when I was coming into the workforce, there was an expectation a lot stronger than today that women would get married and maybe have a kid. I think nowadays there's such an acceptance to a variety of lifestyles that the stigma of being single or childless is a lot less. So women today, younger women today, I think have greater degree of freedom.
I was born to pretty conservative parents who kept saying you should get married in your 20s. When it comes to working mothers, they are often considered not that reliable at work because usually Japanese men don't actively being involved in childcare at home, partly because of the presenteeism at Japanese companies. And also working mothers are always torn between work and home. With the lack of daycare, it's really challenging. And also my fellow moms often say their husbands tend to think you're the main role in childcare at home.
I guess there's a spectrum of reaction. Some are supportive and think that that's totally the way to go. Others are passive aggressively less supportive.
You're a very senior figure in your career, a partner. Have you seen women getting back into your office who've had children? And if so, how have they adapted?
Absolutely. In my line of work, we welcome back mothers with open arms, and they adapt by figuring out the schedule of pickups. They coordinate with husbands. Husbands are usually in the similar line of work, so they both understand the requirement from workplace. So I see a number of happy cases. Of course, there would be troubles and struggles not so evident from outsiders, but people do come back and they continue to thrive.
Yuka, I know your daughter's 5, so she's really young. But when you think of the conversations you'd like to have with her in a few years about being a young girl and then a woman in Japan, what would you say to her?
Well, so she goes to English-based kindergarten right now. So we talk both in Japanese and English at home. Yes. And I intentionally didn't choose Japanese regular kindergartens because I wanted to pass down something tangible to her, some global perspectives. She watches BBC on YouTube and she likes to talk in English. And yeah, we talk a lot about gender. I encourage her to do whatever she likes. And I say, you don't need to wear skirts if you don't want to. And I give her any kinds of toys, cars or trains or building blocks, whatever. So yeah, I think we are doing pretty great so far. So yeah, I just want to keep pursuing, encouraging her as a woman.
It sounds like you had an amazing career, a beautiful daughter. So I have all the respect for you.
Yeah, me as well. And of course, is building a great, successful career. And she also made sure women around her are coming back and still developing and advancing their careers. So that's a really inspiring story for Japanese women. And yeah, I think we can just keep pursuing our dreams.
From Japan, Yuko Tamura, and I would love to meet her 5-year-old daughter, who sounds absolutely amazing. And Yuko was in conversation with Nobuko Kobayashi. We wanted to broaden this discussion to other parts of the world as well. So, get ready for some new guests. KJ is in New York State in the US. Anna's originally from Brazil, but now lives in Malmö in Sweden. And Tina May is in the US city of New Orleans, Louisiana.
I have decided not to have children because A, it's very, very expensive in the U.S. B, it's dangerous for a Black woman to have children in the U.S. The mortality rate is 2 to 3 times more than white women. I'm living a free, fantastical Black magic life, and I can go anywhere I want. I can sleep in whenever I want. I can have alone time. I can have friend times. I can travel the world. Last year, I went to Thailand for a yoga retreat for 10 days on a whim because I wanted to. I have choice, and I'm going to exercise it.
I think my reason is a little bit more philosophical. I didn't want to lose myself. I have my role as a professional, my role as a wife, my role as a friend. And when I see women becoming mothers, all these other roles go to the background and they only play one role as a mother. They kind of lose themselves.
So I'm KJ Clayton. I really love what Anna said about losing yourself when you become a mother, because I see that happening to a lot of my friends and a lot of my family. I grew up very fundamentally Christian, and it was almost expected of me to grow up and have children and become a mother. I always really thought that maternal instinct would kick in, but I've never felt it. I don't believe that I ever will. I just don't feel the need to have children to make my life complete. Like, I am a whole person as I am.
Are there ever occasions when you're sitting speaking to either people you know or people you don't know, and they ask about your decision not to have kids? Or is that simply far too personal for anyone to ask about?
It has happened a lot. It's almost like people have no shame in asking why we don't have kids or why we don't want them. And we're just getting very used to saying that, no, that's just not in the cards for us.
I used to get it a lot when I was younger. People ask me if I think of having kids. When I said, oh, not really, no. I was young, single in London, living my best life. And they would say, oh, you change your mind it's because you're young and single. And as it turns out, I'm older. I haven't changed my mind. 47, I can tell that, I have people ask me probably after I was 40, 42, when I got together with my current partner, if I think about it. And I said, no, it's not, it's not in the cards for me.
I've basically been mostly single my entire life, so I don't really give off a maternal air. I don't bring it up, and people don't bring it up to me often.
And when you see in society, as we do in films, books, the representations of a perfect life, it's usually accompanied by what would be a traditional perfect family. But how do you respond when you see that?
That alone, when you say normal family, is like a loaded phrase. Because recently, a lot of storytelling is veering off from oh, this is the normal family, or they're pulling the curtain back of a heteronormative family. They're showing the cracks. They're showing both sides. I think in the 90s growing up, it was expected, but nowadays in media, there's a lot more representation of what a family looks like, and B, that it's not perfect.
I would have to agree with that. I didn't grow up with the traditional family. Like, I'm adopted. My adopted brother is 15 years older than me, so I never really had that view of the perfect family. I love that the media is moving more towards different definitions of what that is.
I'm very fascinated with the concept of family as well. Being an expat for most of my adult life, you tend to rethink what family means, because I'm away from my biological family, and then your friends become your family if you live in another country.
Yes.
And so you start to rethink, who are my family? What family means? Is it DNA? Is it a connection we have with someone? What is family?
Me and my friends, we call ourselves platonic life partners. Kind of imagine like Golden Girls. We're thinking like, hey, in our 60s, and even now, we take care of each other, regardless of who we're romantic with. When we are in our 60s, 70s, we will be each other's emergency contacts. We will be in each other's lives. We already are caring for each other. If we're sick, we get someone soup. If we need to drive someone, we just take care of each other now in our adult life. And as we get older, we have decided we really enjoy each other. And that's my family. My chosen family are my friends. And of course, I am blessed with a beautiful biological, like my mother, my father, my sister, and brother, and their spouses and their children. I am blessed, but at the same time, I don't live in the same city. So if I need to be driven to the hospital, God forbid, or if something happens to me that's traumatic, I have 2 or 3 people who will come to my aid, and those are my family as well.
Wow, that's so important. I think the younger generation, they are more aware that motherhood is a choice. It's something that wasn't so clear-cut for me. It wasn't a decision I made. I kind of came to that decision. I was already in my late 30s, but I knew deep down that I didn't want children. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Me and my partner, we don't have any children, obviously, but he has a child from a previous relationship, and I consider that my family. So when no one asked me that, but I've heard, case of people saying they get together with a partner and they say, oh, when are you going to start a family? And they say, I have a family already. It doesn't mean your family when you start having children. I have a family already. My parents, I have my partner, my close friends, they are considered as a family as well. Yeah, it's a great life where you can choose your family as well.
And I'm sure we could all get on board with that idea. Anna, KJ and Tina May there. And thank you to all of our guests around the world for sharing their experiences. I'm James Reynolds, and you've been listening to BBC OS Conversations on babies and families.
From the BBC World Service and CBC Podcasts.
The longest part of a scam is really the grooming process.
I keep thinking so much about you. I miss you so badly.
She was trying to get me to send her money.
Initially it was for a broken phone, fixing something in a car.
Love, Janessa, the true crime podcast exploring how one woman's stolen images are being used by criminals as bait to target people looking for love online.
She has to be one of the most catfished images.
Really, anyone can fall for this, right? There's no one type of victim.
I think he sent her close to $5,000.
Oh my gosh!
She said, if you really loved me, you'd do what I asked you to do.
And then you responded.
You used a fake identity, a false story, and stolen photographs. Why should I give you anything at all?
Join Hannah Ajala as she goes in search of the woman whose face has unwittingly launched countless romance scams. It's a story about love, deceit, and survival, and it's available now. Search for Love, Janessa wherever you found this podcast.